Fantastic. Okay, let's get started. Today is the 104th Security Thought Leadership webinar. We started well over a year ago now, the idea of doing 5 thought leadership webinars. And here we are on a number 104. And one of the purposes of thought leadership is to critique what's going on today, to encourage a different way of thinking and analysing what's going on in order that we may get a better type of security tomorrow. And today our topic is one that I think is in the forefront of people's minds. What will the return to work look like? What are the implications for security? We do know that we're going back to different types of workplaces with different types of restrictions. But what are they going to be? And what's it going to be like for security? How is it going to have to adjust? In what ways? And what should we be thinking about? Well, to examine those questions and plenty of others besides, I've got 3 panelists who all come at this from very different directions. They're all based in the United States today, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all ask them to introduce themselves. And once each of them have done that, I'll ask them for their opening statement. And once they've done that, I will then come to each of you, the audience, and say, ask them some questions, join the debate. Let's get some thinking going on this topic. So without further ado, let's go to our panelists. And first of all, Kathy, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me. I'm Kathy Lavender. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Security and Investigative Placement Consultants, more commonly and easily known as SI Placement. I'm based in Virginia, and I've been recruiting for more than 20 years for security leadership and specialized positions, as well as investigator roles and business intelligence positions.
Thank you very much indeed, Kathy. And let's go to Shane.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Shane Bates. I'm a certified protection professional. I'm based here in 1 hour east of Austin, Texas, as you might hear from the deep South accent. I've been involved in security most of my life. I work with technology companies, Fortune 50s, and those, my specialty is security technology. We're in a really interesting place. I'm looking forward to today. Not a lot about me, but I've had a career in security, operated globally, and happy to be along. Thanks for the invite, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. As we move further westwards, let's go and meet Arlene. Arlene, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Arlene Pedrick, the Chief Security Officer with Accenture. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. Finished my first career with the federal government in 2015, and after that, I joined Walmart in their global security group and then moved to Disney as the Director of Global Intelligence before going to Accenture.
Arlene, thank you very much indeed. So we're about to hear now then each of the panelists' opening statements. As we do, can I encourage you to use your question and answer button at the bottom of your screen to get your question in early. We've only got 45 minutes, so do get your questions in early, and I'll endeavour to come to you and involve you in the debate. Okay, so let's go back to Kathy. Kathy, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Martin. So I'm a former journalist. I'm going to give you my headline. Work is never going to be the same again. Hybrid work is here to stay. And when you go back to the office, to whatever degree you go back to the office, it's going to be a very different place. It's going to be a radical change in many ways. There's going to be some adjustment, and some of you will not go back. I hear every day from people who are looking to continue remote forever, who perhaps have relocated to more remote areas from where they've been working previously. They're not going back. It's going to not only become a challenge from a security standpoint, but from a talent retention standpoint. And as a recruiter, I'm going to bring that perspective to the fore today.
Thank you very much indeed, Kathy. And we'll come back to you on those issues, I'm sure. Let's go to Shane then. Shane, your opening statement, please.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Kathy. Great comments. It's really interesting because if you were to listen to David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, he says that it's an aberration and we're going to correct it as soon as possible because we've got an apprentice-based culture. He's talking about getting folks back to normal as soon as possible. I know that's one perspective. if you talk to Satya Nadella at Microsoft, even he said that the lack of division between private life and work life meant that it sometimes feels like you're sleeping at work. So we've got all of these different perspectives that I think are very interesting. Mine comes from a security technology perspective, creating a little bit of a sense of what it's going to be like. So the organizations I've been working with really are interested in leveraging the good old security badge that you can see right behind me here. Innovative companies like RightCrowd, and I consult to them and advise their CEOs. So you've had full disclosure on that, but they've been busy during the pandemic helping organizations prepare for return to work. This little badge you see behind me actually has a proximity sensor in it. And when folks come within 6 feet of each other for an extended period of time that you can set, these little red LED lights flash up and you have the opportunity to log that. And so, you know, you might say, well, yeah, is that Big Brother watching? And there's another perspective on this, which I think is very interesting, and that is the idea of team goals. How are we all doing at social distancing? That's an interesting perspective that I think we're going to begin to see when folks return to work again. So this concept of leveraging the security badge, literally you've just got to put the thing on and it integrates with many different access control systems. I think that's one strong technology that we'll see. I think the bigger questions are going to be around and are being explored right now around HR, facilities, security and legal. What does the policy look like? So we are going to see significant changes in flow. We're going to see health attestation questions. Am I running a temperature? Have I been sick lately? These kinds of things are relatively new, where before it was a personal decision to come in if you had a case of the sniffles or something worse. But I think in summary, the bigger opportunity for security practitioners now, rather than implications, I smell opportunity. There are and have been and will continue to be some significant spending. So it's an excellent time for practitioners who are able to make the case to assist ROI and to be able to help the business in terms of flow to be able to do those things. So there are many projects underway. Thanks. I'll end there. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed, Shane. Really appreciate that. Again, some really good things we can pick up on in conversation afterwards. Just once again to remind you, if you use the question answer button at the bottom of your screen, get your question in early and I'll endeavour to incorporate that question into the discussion afterwards. Let's hear from our final panelist then. Arlene, your opening statement, please.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I think I'm going to take a step back. I can certainly get into details about sort of how we're handling returning to office during the pandemic. We actually have a trial going on of similar sensors to what you mentioned on the badges. But at the same time, we're spending a lot of time trying to understand what the future of work looks like, you know, after this is over. And I want to, you know, put that in air quotes because I'm not sure it's really going to be over. But to start with sort of what Accenture is and does, we're a company of about 500,000 people globally that can broadly be broken down into two populations. We have one population predominantly overseas doing business process work that has been traditionally in the office in sort of a traditional format. We have another population, though, that has been working in a hybrid model for years and years and years, right? I never went to the office since I've been hired. I mean, I go if I need to pick up mail or get my computer worked on, but my home is my office. And there are a lot of people like that. And then additionally, we have our consultants who work in client spaces. So our office space is essentially anything and everything that is out there. And so I've been addressing a lot of issues from a security perspective, you know, beginning 3 years ago when I joined the company. And it's brought a lot of things forward that were difficult to start with and now are going to get even more difficult. So I would highlight issues such as duty of care, right? It was one thing when I chose to work from my house and I didn't go into the office, but now if I'm going to be told that my house is my office, what is my, as a security professional's duty of care regarding something like fire safety, which isn't even traditionally sort of security, it's more, workplace safety, but even something like workplace violence. We have a lot of, spouses who now will not be able to get into an office away from an abusive spouse. We also, I'm sure everyone else has a lot of mental health problems that are picked up on in an office environment when they're talking to their colleagues or their supervisor. I've had 2 cases just in the last few months of people on a call like this suffering a seizure or a heart attack, and their colleagues are like, I don't even know where that person is sitting right now, right? I know they live in San Francisco, but are they at their house? Are they at Starbucks? Are they in a hotel? Are they at their parents' house? How do you get emergency services to someone if they're having, a medical emergency? So a lot of the duty of care issues are being explored right now as we're looking at what the future of work is going to be. And I think a lot of this collaborative structure that was started with the crisis, I mean, it's part of a crisis management team, right? You have your communications people, you have HR people, you have legal, you have everyone else. This team that was brought together over a year ago is critical to figuring out what this is going to look like in the future.
Arlene, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting. Okay, for some fantastic points, and that sets an agenda for us. Let me go first of all. I'll come to you, Shane, first, and then Arlene, you afterwards. Shane, in your opening statement, you did mention that this issue of the potential view this could be Big Brother, and Glenn Kitteringham, himself a former panelist, asked the question about whether, in fact, what you're describing as a benefit, people being able to identify when they're close to one another, may actually be a negative, that they now feel they're going to be spied upon and they're being monitored and they're under the control of the organization. That strikes me as a potentially legitimate concern as well. So Shane first, then Arlene. Shane, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. A very great point, and I think a very legitimate question as well. And it was an interesting conversation that I had with the design group and with many different customers, because this is clearly a case of, it's a case that one size does definitely not fit all here. So depending on your geography, the laws of your country, the policy of your corporation or your employer, these kinds of things define the degree of privacy that we can expect and enjoy. And of course, technology like this is a little bit like a knife. You can use it to cut vegetables or you can use it to do bad things. It's really no different. So I know this particular technology was designed in mind where there were various controls based around policy. So for example, if you want to implement social distancing without contact tracing data, you can do so. Now, let me put the boot on the other foot here and share with you some of the thoughts that the larger clients are thinking about. How do you build resilience in the workplace and safety for the benefit of all? And you follow that question through that, what happens if somebody does get COVID? What's the first kind of thought beyond how do I help them and what do we do next? The logical thought there is, who have they been around? And so are you able to benefit the greater workforce by being able to have that data? Well, many employers are saying yes to that proposition. And it's an interesting topic for security, because the moment that you swipe through a door in a building, you're already collecting data about who went where and when. This really is no different. It's just that you've got the opportunity to be able to collect some real-time data and help protect people and isolate them and be able to identify who they've been in touch with.
Shane, thank you very much indeed.
Right on or off.
Thank you very much indeed, Shane. I'm going to come to Arlene. Arlene, have you had concerns raised to you about the potential Big Brother effect of all this?
Absolutely. And, when we look at implementing a technology globally, we sort of start with Europe and say, ever fly in Europe with EPR and the works councils. That doesn't mean we won't apply it elsewhere, but it's certainly sort of our base understanding what is possible. And actually, Accenture has so many technically smart people that we've probably developed 3 or 4 of our own solutions, that are very similar to what Shane showed, right? Often based off of smartphones as opposed to wearables, but they work with wearables as well. And I think the key is that you can indeed, switch between just proximity sensor. It does not record data, and then the capability of recording data where you want to. So, for most of our office environments, I don't really think it's a necessary add-on, but we do have some environments, say we have warehouses that we have people working in, where they're constantly walking around. And if I ask them, last Wednesday, you were probably contagious in the work. Who was your close contact? You don't have any idea, right? Most of us had enough trouble remembering who we had lunch with last Wednesday. But certainly if you're not sitting at a fixed desk and you know that Susie's always on your left and Joe's always on your right, understanding who you might have been exposed to for 15 minutes within 2 meters is really hard. So there's certain environments where it makes a lot of sense to use these kind of wearables, and that's where we're piloting it right now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Kathy, let me come to you with a different question, if I might. Jean Cox, and I wonder whether you've got a view on this, Kathy, because this change, you're making the point it won't be the same again, okay? And of course, one of the big issues that is a bit of the elephant in the room here is the insider threat and the nature of, rogue employees or good employees being corrupted and therefore becoming rogue. And I wonder, that dynamic, I presume, is changing now, or the risks are changing, or the context in which that is operating is changing, isn't it?
I would say it is. I don't think that I'm probably the best person to comment on whether insider threat has gone up or down. But what I can say is that I just think that maybe there will ultimately be less of a concern around insider threat moving forward if there are just fewer numbers of people gathered in traditional spaces. So if it is truly a hybrid model, just the numbers go down. And I think that's ultimately a benefit.
Yeah, I guess, let me come to you then, Arlene. Yeah, carry on. I was going to come to you because you've mentioned this hybrid model as yourself in your opening statement.
Absolutely. And I certainly don't disagree with Kathy, but I think it's very hard to measure. But one of the big impacts is, how do you develop a corporate culture and feel connected to your employer and your colleagues if you're never in the same office? And bringing everything home, whether it's a laptop or in the dark days when countries were closing down overnight, we gave people desktops and said, go home, right? And they were pushing a lot of security solutions out, one, very quickly, and two, after some of the computers had already left the office. And then you have people leaving, absconding, what happens to the devices. So the remote capability to wipe is super important. But you also, if you're working in some of these environments in let's say, India, where people have left their hometown, have gone to one of the big cities and are living essentially in a dormitory where the people that they live with work for all of your competitors, you really lose a lot of control, I think.
Yeah, I guess, and presumably, Arlene, the key is to be. I mean, it's a matter of what? Keeping up awareness internally, keeping managers informed. I mean, I guess there's a different dynamic on how you manage that.
I would say absolutely. Luckily, the insider threat belongs to the cyber security folks and not me, because I think I would have more gray hair than I do right now. But they have an outstanding training program, and it really is very much awareness. And my background with the government, every time you turn on the computer, you get a pop-up that says, this is not your device, essentially. This is your company's device, and they control it.
Okay. Shane, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you. I would debate and say that clearly cyber risk has remarkably increased, significantly increased. You've got people using technology at home in what is essentially an uncontrolled space. There are many anecdotal examples of the kids getting on it and playing games, all of these sorts of things. They bring new challenges. And I think what it's done is it's brought risk into a much sharper focus. And we've got many opportunities as practitioners. I'd like to pick up on what Alan just said. I think it's more than the responsibility of the cyber security practitioners. It's an opportunity for organizations to be able to offer continued socialization about what's expected, what's demanded, and what is required in terms of policy. And the other thing I think to remember, the broader business thing here, is that tech companies particularly and innovators are always in the business of competing for talent. And when you compete for talent, you've got to ask this question about what really is reasonable. And I think this work from home, work from business balance has presented a new opportunity where we've got many people who have literally changed cities now that they've got the opportunity to do so. You've had the great exodus from San Francisco and California that continues to go on. So that it's a really interesting question, but I think insider threat is there, cyber risk is up, and it's an opportunity for us as security practitioners to have our greatest moment and to be able to provide value and trusted counsel.
Okay, good. Just on that very point, of course, in recruitment, I mean, I guess that we were on a webinar before and we were talking about this, and I think you made this point yourself, didn't you? That there's a lot more scope now to recruit from a lot more diverse. There's talent pools widened for companies, Kathy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and one of the benefits of remote work is that you can follow where the diverse talent is without being limited. The research shows from McKinsey and Harvard Business School and all of that a lot of the diverse talent in the US is centered across the South and not in tech centers like Silicon Valley or New York City. So if you want to take advantage of this moment in that regard, that's absolutely the case. To broaden it out, though, I would just say that I'm convinced that this is going to continue. It's going to have different flavors, different approaches, and different degrees of remote versus in office. So companies are going to have to figure out where they land on that. It may be an iterative change process too. Millennials say they want to go back to the office in large numbers. Other people with younger children, not necessarily. Some other workers who are further along in their careers have benefited and value the flexibility. So it's going to be all over the map, but I think where the security nexus is going to broaden out, not just with the information security side, but with EHS, because there will be people coming in and out, and we have crossed the Rubicon. Things are never going to go back the way that they were, hopefully, because we were kind of blissfully unaware of the challenges and the hazards out there by jamming people into tight workspaces, just creating density, thinking that led to creativity or team building. It has a risk, as we've found out very clearly now. Yeah,
it has a risk, and it might just not be the best thing anyway. It's right. Okay, let me come to you, Arlene, next on this one. Ewan Grant, based in London, says, I've worked in the field as a contractor in the situations you described. And how will the new hybrid models be managed? Many field contract projects are not well managed, not just because there are not enough managers. Good point. I mean, there is a broader issue about how we adapt to managing the change. Arlene.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I actually understand that question, since I feel like I've talked about almost every possible arrangement of hybrid.
Well, no, what he's saying is, I think the point is, okay, so you've got those, okay, you've got those, you describe them, and they exist. The question is, though, to make them work is not a matter of saying they've all got potential. The process of making them work is a lot more endemic in practice, in management skills, in organizational skills.
Absolutely.
And it's far from obvious we've got those, Arlene, or have we?
Well, again, as I said, Accenture has been working sort of a hybrid model and working in other client spaces, so remotely managing people for years and years and years. And it's sort of part of their leadership DNA, how you manage a remote team. So for example, my security team, we're not huge, but we are global, right? I have almost met all of them in person once before the shutdown happened a year ago. But I still feel that we are able to work as a team. We have developed a common culture. We understand a mission. A lot of that is, maybe the training in the government I had in leadership, as far as, ensuring there's a vision and that people are empowered to make decisions on that vision without you having to micromanage it. But I think looking, past my group and looking at Accenture as a whole, the work that is being done is to get a much more granular understanding of the exact job you're being asked to do, and what jobs require you to be in an office, what jobs require you, because maybe for security reasons, for network connectivity reasons. We have a lot of call centers that people just can't do from home because their connectivity is not good enough. We are the biggest digital advertising agency in the world. The creative types desperately need to be in the same space together, whether it's because, not that they don't have big monitors at home, but it's just the way they work, right? So each job and each type of job will require a different hybrid structure, right? How often do you need to be in? They want to make it very much employee driven. How much do you want to be in? But it will also depend on your job, right? If you're a job that has to be in 100%, you're not going to be able to choose to work from home for 100%.
See, the thing is, they're really good points, these, Arlen. I mean, I'm not sure they're obvious either. Perhaps they're only obvious when you say. But I mean, to what extent, and I'm just going to ask you to maybe speculate from the network you're in, to what extent do you think organizations are onto those requirements to make them work? Would you say there's a universal understanding here and don't worry, it's under control?
Well, I think it certainly should be now. I'm not sure it was a year ago, but I think everyone has been struggling. I mean, if you look at, Zoom, for example, or Teams with Microsoft, and the implementation of that over the last year, I mean, Accenture has done quite well because we tend to, to come in and implement these solutions for companies. And everybody's asking for it, more remote working tools. But along with that is, how do we actually use the tools to get the work done and to keep people connected? And that, is a developing science. I think, I'm not sure there are great answers out there yet.
Okay, good. Interesting. Shane, let me bring you in on this.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a similar perspective here. The US workforce is around 140 million people. Immediately before the pandemic, the work from home number was nearly 3.5%, about 4.7 million. I don't think the jury's out on this yet. I think there are several very interesting factors. As Arlen pointed out, it depends on the work that you do. If you're in an Amazon fulfillment center and your job is putting things in boxes, you're not going to get a lot of work from home choice. However, if you're a knowledge worker and you are a tech talent that's really sought after, I think that's really been the factor that is making enormous changes, because people have now had a lick of the ice cream, so to speak, and they want more. They've been working at home. They can sit there as I am today with my slippers on beneath my desk, pussycats in the background. Life is good, man. No commute. But there is a sense at the other end of all of this, Martin, of needing to interact and be part of the team culture. And it's interesting, in the research I've seen, about 1 in 5, Buffer report, 1 in 5 have been suffering loneliness and communication difficulties, and my colleagues have alluded to that. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about balance. It's going to be about the leverage that you've got as a valuable contributor to your organization, and whether or not you're a knowledge worker. And I think the last thought here I'd want to leave you with is, I would contend that there's actually been a lot of team building in the pandemic that might not have happened anyway. People are becoming used to video. For the first time, you see colleagues who are turning on video inside Zoom to communicate. And so this pandemic has really been quite unusual, in as much that we've accelerated the process of acceptance of video. Here we are today with hundreds watching, collaborating together. Everything's going smooth. That's the great surge forward, isn't it?
Okay. So Arlene, just very quickly,
yeah, I would say too, because one of the huge impacts of the pandemic has been on female employees to start with, right? But I have to say, it used to be, yes, you can have flex-a-place, and it often was the women who needed to be home for elder care or child care, and all the other people were back in the office, going out to lunch and coffee, and they missed out on a lot of things, and they felt sort of excluded. By democratizing this flex-a-place, I think it will be hugely helpful for women in the workforce.
Oh, interesting. Kathy, what are your thoughts?
Well, in the short term, it's been terrible for women, because they've had everything piled on them disproportionately, according to the surveys. Women still are doing much of the housework while working full time, while overseeing homeschooling for children. So 2 million women have left the US workforce during this pandemic. But ultimately, I just saw a survey that said 73% of the 2,000 people they surveyed wanted this hybrid model, work from home option to continue. I think people do see the value. As Shane said, they've had a taste of it. It is like ice cream. It's pretty good in many ways. But I'm worried about what they're going to encounter when they go back, whether partially or because they're told they must go back. And, they're going to go back to hot desking, hoteling, bringing their own heavy bags full of coffee mugs, headphones, cables, all of that, because you can't go around touching everything else. They'll be using lockers, not putting up pictures of their kids on their desk because they won't have their own desk. So what is that going to do to, the effort to try to foster collaboration? It's going to be frustrating. It's going to be a big change for people. And I just think that we're going to see some people struggle more with that than perhaps we can foretell right now. I think it's going to be a massive adjustment, just like work from home was a massive adjustment.
Just on that issue, I was going to come to this in a second, Kathy, because Simon Cham has asked a question about recruitment and thinking of women specifically. I just wonder, the same point you were making earlier about the increase in talent pool, you can recruit talent from outside areas. What's the impact of that on women? Presumably that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? I'm guessing, I'm asking actually.
It's absolutely a net positive. In recruitment, most of the time you're talking about perhaps a dual career couple these days in the knowledge workforce, and they're often tied to a location because of a partner's job, and just generally it's difficult. And I've had several searches recently where it was remote, flexible location. It opens up tremendous opportunities, not just for women, but for everyone.
Interesting. Okay. Democratise taking place. Shane, I'm going to come to you in a second. I'd like to move on if I might, though, Shane, because I've got a lot of questions coming in here and I want to make sure I do them justice. Arlene, Mike Cummins, a former panelist, has asked about disputes between workers. Perhaps because, I guess this is another interesting point, isn't it? We're all assuming this is all hunky-dory, right? We're pointing out some of the positives. But there is that danger, isn't there, that people are more scared now. They've got views perhaps about what should be going on, and views about what the business should be doing, views about, this has got the scope to go the other way. So let me come to you first. I see Shane's nodding, so I'll come to Shane afterwards. You first, Arlene.
I guess I would say, I haven't seen an increase, but I would say, those kind of things normally only get to me if it actually involves somebody making physical contact with someone else. So that's going to happen a lot less, obviously, when you're not in an office. I would have to sort of ask my HR, ER compatriots if they've had, more issues of disrespect and just sort of arguments on some sort of remote connection than they would have seen before. And, you might actually just get more reporting too. There could be a reporting artifact there because you won't have as many one-on-one meetings, and now everybody's watching that, which actually should mean that, people are more respectful because they know that, their entire team is listening to, how they behave.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I'm going to bring in Shane for a brief comment, then Kathy for a brief comment. I want to move on to the next topic. Shane, brief comment, please.
So I'll just be quick on that. I got a couple of thoughts. People can't wait to get back around the water cooler and start gossiping again. That is just the basic, that's human nature, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And I think this idea that removing communal spaces and nobody wanting to get sticky COVID and all of that, a lot of that's going to become a thing of the past. I think that's the reality. In that organisations are giving careful thought to how the communal spaces should look, because you got to work with the expectation of welcoming, greeting and socialising with your team members. So that has to be supported. Otherwise, why would you bother going to work, right? And you know, the second thought too was about, I had some data to be able to support what Kathy was talking about relocation. It's really interesting. My wife is a professional licensed realtor here in Texas, so I get a lot of these updates. And so here's an interesting update in the US of the people that are moving during the pandemic. Nearly 1/3 of them are going cities to suburbs. So there's been the great exodus from this cramped inner city living, 30% there. The other 40% are moving more than 100 miles and maybe even further than 500 miles. That's been split 20%, 20%. So a fifth are going more than 100 miles, another fifth are going more than 500. And then guess what? 15% of them are like me. They're way out rural. I'm in the middle of nowhere. It takes me 45 minutes to get to the nearest city. I'm happy about that though.
Thanks, Shane. Kathy, just a quick comment from you as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to further explore a little bit what Arlen was talking about, workplace conduct, because it has changed. And just a brief point on that. What we've seen is, you know, obviously people are not, knowledge workers are not in close proximity at the moment, but the harassment has moved to verbal cyber type bullying through various platforms or Slack channels or whatever it is. And there's quite a lot of discussion among a lot of women in professional settings that they feel like they are under attended to and sometimes even muted during Zoom conversations. So there's an issue of being silenced and being disrespected in this hybrid work environment.
Goodness me, I didn't know that. That's please, thank you for raising that. That's important. Let's move on. We're going to move. I'm going to come to you first time this time, Shane. Michael Gibbs says there's growing evidence that the insider threat has gotten out of hand during the pandemic in the terms of fraud, espionage, harassment, negligent use of computer assets. And the question is, Shane, specifically, what should security be doing in response to this? I'll come to Arlene afterwards, but you first, Shane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Martin, and great question, Mike. I certainly appreciate that. I alluded to that a little bit earlier, that security practitioners have the opportunity, if you don't have cyber skills or a decent understanding of it, you really should have, because it's one of those disciplines of security. If you are to be a certified protection professional, the idea here is that you've got some knowledge and understanding of the broader scope. But to answer Mike's question, of course, we've sort of started to frame that conversation about why there are risks and problems, because we've moved from very centralized, controlled networks that are inside a controlled physical perimeter, where everybody's got their desktop sitting on the office desk, to literally picking them up, taking them home, and not a lot of control over it. That is problematic. But what it is doing is it's driving some interesting opportunities. VPNs, for example, if you begin to look at the data around virtual private networks, that's increased significantly. If you actually look at, and I see we're using the Zoom platform today, you'll remember the criticism that Zoom had just several months ago, and they really had to lift their game on this. So I think there are some interesting signs that, number one, it's acknowledged to be an issue. Number two, we've got to do better. Number three, we're moving forward, and we're really getting some more flexible computing options. So again, like I said, for security practitioners, we need to be part of that.
Yeah. Okay, Arlen, let's come to you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree that, the potential is much larger. Human nature being what it is, the human is always sort of the weak link in the technology platform. So, training is super important, awareness is super important. Um, again, I'm not on the cyber side, but the data loss prevention tools are very important. The technology that you can put on a laptop, on someone's device to do behavioral analytics. As we are looking at some pilot examples of the wearables and sort of physical security devices, they're also looking at the potential to, for example, restrict your ability to send attachment to personal email address, right? And it's not just an issue of can we, because of course they can. It is, what is the impact on your people and culture? And that is so much harder to measure. Right? So it, just as with physical security, is that balance between being big brother and having a completely different, it's the very same thing with cyber.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because Keith Nielsen was just saying that you said the opportunities have increased, and I think that was the point Keith Nielsen was making. Listen, we're running out of time. I'm going to, Kathy, very quickly, please. Gordon Knight says, do you see recruitment requirements changing in terms of teamwork being less important than the ability to work independently? I can see why Gordon asked the question. Is that going to happen, Kathy?
That is a great question. I would say no. Teamwork is going to always be important. It's a different mode of teamwork, but it will continue to be vitally important.
That's encouraging. And finally, I've got a question from where was the question? Bear with me a second. I lost the question. The question was, should employees be mandated to take COVID tests in order to come back to work? Now, thorny, now you're all based in the United States. This is a thorny one in the UK, I've got to tell you. So let's go to you first, Kathy. Reasonable to be mandated or not?
It depends on the environment, and it also depends on the state in this country. There are various state rules and regulations, but I think in many cases, the answer from labor lawyers would be, yes, they can mandate that.
Arlene, what's your take on this?
We're sort of in the middle of this right now, right? It is absolutely under consideration at Accenture, making it mandatory where it's legally allowed. What we have seen, and I'm sure everyone else is getting the same thing, is, well, if we're tested, that means I don't have to wear a mask, right? Or if I'm vaccinated, why do I have to be tested, right? And they're really good scientific answers for that, but I'm more concerned that you get tested and you think, oh, we're all safe, and that is absolutely not true. And so it's that education piece. People describe it as sort of slices of Swiss cheese. A mask is really, a pretty solid slice. Testing maybe has a lot more holes in it, but you put enough pieces together and you've got a solid wall. And it is one more slice of the cheese, but you can't get rid of any of the other ones either.
Yeah, interesting point. It's Dave Watson's question, by the way. Final comment from you then, Shane, just 30 seconds if you wouldn't mind. Mandated or not?
Certainly no more. I think the answer to that is it really depends. I mean, your average common sense person would say terrific idea. But again, we have diversity of views, diversity of thoughts. We have anti-vaxxers. We have the whole bell curve and spectrum of opinion. Again, and I think my colleagues have already said, it'll depend on the law. It will depend on the culture. But again, I come back to this idea that you're competing for talent too. People also want to feel safe. So organizations are not going to set policy for one person who wants to be different than the rest, or you can go find another job. That's the bottom line. Thanks.
Panelists, thank you so much for your time, for your input. That was absolutely fascinating discussion. And of course, this issue is one that's going to go on and on and on. And I'm sure we'll revisit it in due course as this pandemic unfolds and as this return to work. But some fascinating observations, though, about what this may look like and the extent to which we may manage it, both in terms of generally in terms of security. So thank you very much indeed, panel. That was excellent. Okay, let me just a few final comments, if you wouldn't mind, just 20 seconds. Just to say the OSPA's entries are still open in Kenya, Romania and the United States. They close on the 1st of July there. So start to get your entries in those three countries. Look out, other countries open soon. Australia next week. We'll be announcing that. Okay, and just to say to you, cyber OSPAs, these are happening. There's all the cyber associations around the world are uniting to recognise those who are really, really good at cyber security. So if your association is not involved yet, let them contact us and get involved in the cyber OSPAs. Entries will open soon. We'll be providing you with more information on this broadcast. Finally, just to say to you, we'll be going through it all again next Tuesday, when we'll be looking at the subject of security and sustainability, that buzzword, sustainability. But what are the implications for security? Well, we'll be looking at it with 3 panelists next Tuesday, so I hope you'll join us then. Let me just once again say thank you to the audience for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get through everything. We tried, but just too many questions, but thank you. Thank you once again to my panelists, who are absolutely fantastic for their insights. I very much hope that you'll be joining us again soon. I hope it will be on Tuesday, 3:30 BST, but if it's not, whenever we do, until we see you again, stay safe.